And then this afternoon, the only thing I'm doing, I'm like, keep my schedule clear because Gabby's doing something this morning too. And this is a USA basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Gold medal game against France.
Gold medal game.
That's
good, dude.
That's 2:30. So
That should be really good.
I've been highly interested in that just because LeBron's back on the team.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see him, Curry, and KD together.
Last run, man.
I'm telling you. But it's been fun watching them. I feel like they should be blowing teams out, but
And that's the hard part for me to grasp is like
everybody says it.
skill, but getting all of the egos and all of the skill to work on the floor together is the hard part.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. I'm sure that's a term that you've heard many, many times, even if you've not been in the business world in any way, shape, or form. Regardless of what you're leading, your family, a church, business, employees underneath you, whatever it is, leadership is something that is a very underdeveloped skill for a lot of people. But in my opinion, it's something that needs to be developed immensely. Like it needs to be an immense priority for a lot of folks, like everybody. So one of the things that we talk about on this podcast with Seth Hardy today is leadership. We go into some really, really good conversation about this. I even give you a silly example about how leadership was kind of taught to me early on by watching the movie A Bug's Life. It's a great story, I promise, but it was something that was drilled into me when I was very, very young. Another thing that we really do go into is how fast Seth and his company has grown. So Seth, if you didn't know, is co-owner of Dynasty Real Estate business that buys houses from motivated sellers in the Northwest Indiana Chicagoland market. He does talk about that towards the end of the episode, but everything that we have in terms of being able to connect with Seth is going to be linked down in the description below. But you can visit him at webuy219.com to be able to connect with him and, potentially sell your property to him if you are needing that. But with Seth today, like he started in the business at this point that we're recording the episode about 4.5 years ago, and he's grown super, super fast. It had a record week this week that we're recording this episode, and he talked about that off screen. But man, he has been crushing it lately in our market. And one of the things that he struggled with early on was actually leadership. And there was a lot of other things like the employees that he had, like he was really struggling with leading them and that sort of thing. And he had never actually been in the business world. He was actually going to school for physical therapy. He was fully kind of wrapped around that space where he was going to be getting a doctorate degree and that sort of thing. He went to school for it. He had a job doing it, and it was something he loved and had a very deep passion for. And one of the bridges that we made, I even asked him, like, how did you go from like physical therapy into the real estate world? And the connection that he made was he cares about people. He cares about helping people from one situation to a better situation, problem solving. And that's a conversation we go deep into as well. But there's a lot of lessons learned in this episode. Seth's a very good friend of mine. We actually went to high school together for a year. He graduated with my wife. And I actually got to play a year of basketball with him. So this is going to be a really, really good episode. One episode that I've been looking forward to very, very much. So without further ado, it's my good friend, Seth Hardy. This is the Impact Network, and I'm your host, Josh Culler. I am really excited to bring you an awesome episode with my very good friend and longtime friend, Seth Hardy with Dynasty Real Estate. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Happy to be here. This is great.
Yeah, this feels like home because you've been here quite a few times.
I have.
Right?
I have.
So Seth and I go way back even to high school. So Seth graduated with my wife, and we played basketball together, had some good times there. And dude, one of the things that like, I don't remember how long ago it was. I just remember, and that I'm going to bring this story up, that we sat down at the Outback Steakhouse because you wanted to start talking to me, and you had conversations with a couple other people about getting into real estate.
Yep.
And you sat down with me, like asking about marketing and that sort of thing. That had to have been like, what, 5-6 years ago, something like that? Maybe around that time mark? I mean,
probably close to 5.
Yeah.
Because we've been in business for 4 years.
Yeah. So it's
full years.
It's been right before that.
Yep.
So one of the things that really impressed me the most, and it like, I didn't even have this predetermined thought about you and Mike, but like I had plenty of conversations with people previous to that like, hey, can I sit down and buy you lunch or get coffee? It's the famous one. And then you spend time with them and they don't do anything with it.
Right.
One of the things that I thought was really impactful in the relationship with you was I could tell right away that you were just like on the money with it, because even some of the things I would tell you, you were super familiar with it already. You had done your homework. But you've grown really fast in the business the last few years.
Yep.
You have been one of the more well-known players in this market, the Northwest Indiana market. Action taking is obviously like a pillar of you in your life. Yeah. Is that something you've always had? Is that something that you've developed over time and just like you're thoughtful of it? Or talk to me about that. Like,
it's one of the largest assets, but also one of the largest detriments that I have.
Yeah. You're a quick implementer, and that's kind of the point here, right?
Yeah. So I'd kind of, shoot first and aim later. So I think it's always something that I have done. I don't know why or what triggered that, but I've always just kind of been like, hey, let's just go for it.
Yeah.
And figure it out. There's always some sort of plan or idea that I have going in. But generally speaking, no, it's always something that has kind of been inherent. I've always had it.
Yeah. What is that like? Did that come from parents? Did that come from just, you think, DNA? Like, that's just who you are? Because your brother's the same way.
Brother's the same
which
way.
We'll get on the podcast at some point. But he's the same way.
That'd be cool, actually.
Yeah.
No, I think if anything, it goes all the way back to sports.
Yeah.
You can't really sit around and think about what you're going to do or how you're going to react to things. You just need to roll with the punches and turn the ball over. You got to get back on defense. You got to think on your feet. So I think it really just stems all the way back to sports. My parents aren't really very much like that. They're very well thought out. Both parents, actually. So I don't think it comes from that, but I think it does come from just constantly being around sports, having to think on my feet and make quick decisions and just roll with it until it either fails or succeeds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's one thing that like I dial back to is like, I only got to play basketball with you for a year because you were a freshman, I was a senior, and you typically a freshman is going to play on junior varsity. You went all the way up to varsity, ended up being a starter, and one of the things I highly like. I don't know if it was just because you were. No, I know why. It's just the work ethic. I was gonna say like, a younger player playing up on a varsity team is normally gonna try even harder.
Yeah.
But I could just tell at practices and during games, like the level at the effort was maximum.
Yep. Well,
and you just had your foot on the.
It's because the skill wasn't there. So I had to make up. I had to make up for it.
Give yourself a little credit.
Yeah, but a lot of it was effort points. I'm sure coaches notice that, and they're like,
"Yeah,
hey, this kid's going to come in and do what he can.
Yeah,
and we'll deal with the insufficiency in other areas." So
but it's an interesting conversation. Like, this is something that has like not really come up organically on this podcast. Is how sports relates to like playing sports in your younger years relates to how you develop in life and especially in business. And obviously, like, this podcast, once again, is not specifically meant for business owners, but the impact that I think sports has on people's lives. I mean, I grew up playing sports, and I think a lot of the tendencies that we have, I mean, you specifically said, like, it made up for, lack of skill, but like action does that. Yep. Like, just taking action does that. So you practicing hard, you playing hard can make up for a lot.
Yeah,
that goes into it. I mean,
I think like how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Sure.
And growing up, I wasn't the best at any single sport, so I had to make up for that with effort. And so I played 5 sports in high school at the varsity level, and you just cycle into them, and you're not going to be the best at every single one of them. So you get in there and you just outwork people and you play your role. And I feel like that transfers into every part of your life, including business. So maybe it hasn't come up organically a lot, but I do think that if you look back to how somebody was raised and the way that, they interact on the court or the field, it transfers directly into how you attack life.
Yeah.
In a way. So
yeah, for sure. And one thing I've noticed about you too that, like is interesting and relevant as well is that you're a really good team player. Just even in the business, like having a partnership in business can be really challenging sometimes. And I'm not saying you haven't had challenges because I'm sure you've had. Every business partnership has had challenges. Is being a team player like very close to you, or is that something you think about? Does that come naturally, like getting people involved around you, or is that something you have to think about a lot?
Yeah. I think that comes pretty naturally as well. Just from being, I've never been the individual athlete either.
Yeah.
So I didn't wrestle. I ran track, but I just ran track for fun because the people that I liked in high school were the people that ran track. So I ran track. But no, I mean, you got to get a team to rally around you. Like I said, I was never the go-to person to lead the team, but I was always the energy that people needed. I was always the person that rallied others to fill their role and do what they were best at and kind of set the stage for them to do what they needed to do.
Yep.
So I think it kind of comes from that sports background, honestly. That and just the familial atmosphere that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. So I do want to dip into the business a little bit. You've grown really fast and have, again, like I do truly think that the amount of action that you've taken has impacted the growth significantly. You know, you're going to fail a lot, but typically the more that you do, the higher chances you have. You know, you miss every shot you don't take, that whole mentality. What has that been like in the growth patterns that you guys have developed? I mean, has there been a lot of challenges that have come with that?
Oh, yeah.
How are you battling those? What's going on with like the growth patterns that you guys are seeing?
Yeah. So I know we had the intro, obviously, but 4 years ago is when we officially started in real estate.
Yeah.
And from that point, we have gone from 0 deals starting in May of 2020 to now we will probably eclipse somewhere near or more than 200.
Crazy.
So with that comes a lot of headaches, right? Because there's other guys in our market that are doing similar deal volume, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. However, they've been in the business for 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
Right. And it's taken them that long to get to that point. Yep. Or grow their teams to the size that we have. So you imagine all the mistakes that they've made in 20 years compacted into 3.5 years full-time, 4 years total.
Yeah.
It's a lot, man. And there's a lot of headaches, a lot of learning business, a lot of growth, understanding leadership, finances behind the business, what you need to do to grow as an individual to maintain what you've grown within business. So, a lot of mistakes, a lot of personal growth, a lot of team growth. And, the more you mess up, the more you learn. So
what were you doing before real estate?
I was in physical therapy.
Okay, so you weren't in the business world before you got into real estate.
Not at all, which is
interesting.
It's one of the toughest parts, actually. There's no internship. I didn't work for anybody else other than just in the physical therapy space. Yeah. So as soon as I got into it, all I had was, the people that I was selling houses to.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned, and I just provided them as much value as possible and made as many mistakes as I could to figure it out, honestly. So there's a lot of headaches trying to figure it out.
That's interesting. And people that know my story, and you know my story too, is just like I was in the business world for 6-7 years before I went full-time into business. Yeah. And that had a really big, part in me being able to go into business in a successful manner and that sort of thing and have my head on straight just because I was in and around it. So somebody like you that just jumped right into it without any experience previous.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Was that a culture shock for you?
Yeah, definitely. So if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have played my cards different.
Sure.
However, it's just, like I said, just jumping straight into things is my biggest asset, but also my biggest detriment. So I probably would have played things a little bit differently and jumped in maybe 6 months to a year later full time. However, jumping straight into it taught me to just, again, think on my feet and just try to figure things out. Yeah. It also made me take a lot of time to work on investing in different courses and personal development things. So at one point, the goal was to have 3 different variations of coaches surrounding us to make sure that we were kind of bulletproofing our path to success. And so we had a personal coach, we had a business consultant, and then I had just like a life coach to make sure that, all 3 portions of my life were growing at the same exact time. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons that we were able to grow without having any experience in the business, is because most of what we did with the proceeds from our business in the first year or two went straight back into education.
Interesting. Yeah. So the way that most people learn, there's normally two camps. Is that the person that does everything themselves and then learns from the battle scars, the losses, the wins, and the immense amount of failures and the lessons learned off of those and that sort of thing. And then that's how they learn. And then maybe later on they dabble in education, they get a mentor, they join a mastermind or whatever. And then normally there's the person that just educates, and that's how they learn. They go into what they're doing just based off of the education that they've learned. It sounds like you did a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Is that the formula that you went into for, and both of those, right?
Aggressively at the same exact time. The other thing you mentioned, I sat down with you. I didn't quite understand what you did. You probably picked up on that through conversation. I didn't quite understand what you did back then, but I was like, dude, he's around these guys all the time. I'm going to just sit down and figure out what he does, ask some questions, and get around people that are doing it. I probably pissed a couple people off in this area because I was just like, dude, do you want to grab coffee? Let's grab lunch. They're like, man, this kid just wants to take me away from what's productive all the time. And I'm just like, man, let me sit down, get around people, and see if I can provide value in any way, send them as many deals as I can, and eventually, create an authentic relationship to where, yes, I'm learning from them, but I'm also bringing their business value on top of all the education we were doing on the sidelines and behind the scenes. That really helps grow things pretty quick.
Was there a form of education that helped you the most? Like, was it a mentor? Was it one of those mentors? I know you joined a couple masterminds. Was it a certain relationship?
I think to a point, like, you have these dreams like, oh, okay, cool. It'd be so cool if I could just make $20,000 a month. Right. Like, and then you work, and you hit your first $20,000 a month. It's like, man, that was awesome. But
what's next?
Let's try to do 50, right? Yeah. And then you do 50 and you're like, okay, I hit 50 and now it doesn't feel like it should because I hit it. And I'm like, what does the big picture look like now? So I think two things. Number one was getting around people who were 10 times larger than what you could imagine being at the time. So I got around a couple of people that, our goal at the time was to maybe make $500,000 or $1 million in a year, right? Got around a couple of people who were doing $5 million to $10 million a year, and it was a very similar business. And it just kind of opened your eyes like, oh man, there's this can really be done, but this is what it looks like at scale. Yeah, I think is the first thing. Because if you don't know what the picture looks like, you can't try to construct it in your own business. Sure. Which is, talk about thinking bigger. It's very difficult to think bigger if you've never seen bigger, right?
It's interesting.
Yep. The second piece of it was, in order to achieve that scale and all of the systems and processes and KPIs and the leadership that it takes to lead a team and give them the education they need to effectively work within your organization. When you jump in, you don't know what goes into building a business, what goes into building a culture, and being a good leader, training good salespeople, training the admin staff on what they need to be doing consistently. So you almost need to get some sort of consultant that has been in the field and that has done what you're looking to do with multiple businesses at scale. And so a personal coach that has done it at scale 10 times bigger than I ever thought was the first one that made a huge impact. And then the second was a good consultant. Yeah. Was able to help us structure our organization.
That's interesting. So that can go into many different conversations. But the first thing that I think about is, like, the fact that you got those coaches for those specific areas of your life. I think that's really impactful. One of the reasons, one of the parallels I kind of equate this to is if we're truly trying to be professionals in our industry, in our area, I look at it no different than an NBA player trying to be a professional NBA player.
Right.
Typically, 100% of the time, they're not just going to have the head coach of the team.
Right.
They're going to have a personal trainer, a personal coach, somebody that's holding them accountable to their training methods. I know even some athletes, like, they'll have specific coaches in specific areas of their life. So they'll have like a shooting coach, they'll have a dribbling coach, then they'll have a conditioning coach, and it's just like you got
your strength coach,
exactly.
mental health coach, like a life
right.
coach, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
To make sure their mindset's on everything. So
Yeah.
100%.
I think in that form of getting that kind of like leadership, it's a cheat code. Like it truly is that you're jumping ahead, you're taking a fast lane in a good way to get to where you're wanting to. And a lot of times too, I think some people get this stigmatism of like they lean one way too hard or the other. I personally have mentors that I don't pay for, right? Like they're personal friends, guy who owns this studio, Gary Harper. He's somebody that I don't pay a dime to him, but he and I talk frequently and I can like lean on him for advice and that sort of thing because that's a strong relationship and bond that I built with him. And I don't take advantage of it. I go at a pace with it and that sort of thing. But I also do pay for masterminds and I do pay for coaching. And there's just certain levels of each one that I think everybody needs to have. That's really important, which I think that you have as well. And it truly is a cheat code. And I do think I love the idea of having, a coach or some type of mentor for every area of your life. It's just somebody to look up to, somebody like if you're going through a problem in some way, shape, or form, you know where you can go to get help. Because I think obviously something that is you've applied very deeply to your life is just not doing things by yourself. Like you can take action by yourself. You know that you're the only one that can do the action, but you can at least get guidance from somebody to go in that direction.
You almost look at them as buffers, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you're going to put, I tell almost every coach this in any part of life. It's like, dude, I will run through a brick wall for you, but I just need to know which brick wall to run through.
Right.
So point me in the right direction.
Is it the one that has 6 layers or just this one?
Yeah, point me in the right direction and I'm going to take action and try to be as efficient as possible doing it. But early on, that was a little bit of a mindset shift. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
You start making a little bit of money in your business, and you're like, cool, I got some cushion, I got some money in the bank, right? And then we're like, okay, let's grow the business. How about we throw it back in marketing or hire somebody to help us, right? Instead, we threw probably close to 50% of it right back at education in the very first year. All of our first proceeds, 50% of it probably went back to education.
Yeah.
And so there's a mindset shift because it's like, dude, why are we spending our money on something that could potentially not get us a return versus we could go pay for more leads or pay for some admin help to make our lives a little bit easier. And in reality, you look at it and it's like, yes, there may not be a direct ROI to closing a deal, right? But you're paying for speed and you're paying for proximity.
Yeah.
And so I've never been around anybody in the real estate space to start with. There's no reason for them to give me, any time of day.
Yeah.
And so you pay for their proximity and to be able to bounce things off of them. You're also paying for speed in the fact that they have way more experience than you do, and you're going to learn from the failures that they've already experienced, and try to avoid those or figure out how to deal with them on your path to success. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Something that I was going to ask you as well is so how old are you?
29.
You're 29.
I had to think about it.
You're 20. Yeah. I feel you. Once you get past 30, you start to forget.
Yeah.
So if you're a 4 year, so you started a little bit earlier than I did because I went into business when I was 20, late 25, full time. So you would have been about 24, 25. Is that correct?
Just turned 25.
Okay, so you're about the same time.
Yep.
One of the things that I always really like to kind of invest in is obviously the youth. I think it's highly important to make sure that, there's people that are younger that would look up to us and, especially in the eyes of if you're successful and that sort of thing, that's, obviously subjective. However, there's certain levels to it. So if you're, talking to somebody that is 25 now,
sure,
and they're listening to this right now, maybe they're 23, 24, 25, whatever, what's a piece of advice you'd give them if they were interested in going into business?
I would just say maybe start thinking a little bit different than what you're thinking right now, right? Most people go to college or get into some sort of trade or get into a regular work routine, regular W-2 by the time they're 25, typically. And, you get into the regular rat race where you work a 9 to 5, and it's good if that's what you're shooting for. But, I feel like the biggest disservice people do to their families is not becoming the most optimal version of themselves. And so that's subjective, I guess, depending on what you think you can become. But I guess my challenge would be start thinking a little bit bigger, start looking at what other people are doing and people that have a little bit more, and ask the question, what can I really achieve if I put my mind to it for 5 to 10 years? Because it's not going to happen overnight. But I would just challenge people to think a little bit bigger than where they're at right now, and know that there's a little bit more to life, and the best thing they can do for their families is become the most ideal version of themselves.
That's fire. And I think that when we talk about this topic specifically, a lot of people will think like, yeah, but I really didn't want to go into business. Like, I don't feel like I'm a business owner, that type of thing. And I always tell people, like, look, being a business owner isn't for everybody. There's a lot, and I'm sure you relate to this too. There's a lot of days where I feel like, man, I don't want to be doing this shit anymore. Like, this is not something I want to be doing for the rest of my life, type thing. And then you snap back into it and you're like, all right, I'm good. Like, it's a roller coaster life. Like, it can suck sometimes, but I truly don't think that business is for everybody. There are some people, types of personalities that, like, they are happy with the certain job that they have where they can clock in, clock out every single day. They know what they're doing. And like, if you're listening and you're that person and you're like, yeah, Josh, I really don't want to go into business and I'm cool with where I'm at, I would still take what Seth said and apply it. Like, just still be the best person that you can possibly be, the most optimal human being that you can be, from health to spiritual, like your relationships, everything. It's still relevant.
It's still applicable. Yeah, I agree. It's not for everybody. I think anybody could do it. I don't think it's a personality fit for everyone.
Yeah, sure.
So
I agree.
But even if your preference is to get a nice paying W-2 job, live a great life, and have balance in your life, because honestly, business is not always balanced, right?
Yeah.
Very, very seldom is it balanced. But I think if you take the general principle of it and you're fine, punching the clock, that's totally cool. But what else can you do to be the best version of yourself while doing that for your family and for yourself, right? From a health perspective, or the extra money that you're able to save because, your family has a consistent W-2 paycheck. What can you do to invest and build that for your future and your family's future? I think it's more of a mindset. So that was what I had to start going through back during COVID, actually, when I was working my way through physical therapy, and I was trying to just figure out how to speed things up. I was like, dude, I want to be a little bit more than what I am right now, and I'm not quite sure how to go about it. I was going to go back to school to get my doctorate in physical therapy, and it was going to take, I already had my foot in the door. I was working as a physical therapist assistant, which is an associate's degree. I was on the path to get my bachelor's, and then after that, 3 more years of full-time grad school. And I was like, dude, I don't want to wait 3 to 4 more years to figure out how to start living the life that I want to live. And I just started thinking bigger. I was like, dude, there's 25, 30, 35-year-olds that have the life that I would want. Why do I have to wait 3 more years to figure it out? And so I started doing extra in my free time. I wasn't playing video games. I wasn't out at the bars drinking. I mean, at one point maybe, but
1 or 2 times.
At one point, a little earlier.
I was there.
a little earlier in life. But at that time, I was like, all right, it's kind of grind mode right now.
You're taking it seriously.
Yeah. What can I do to, accelerate this thing and get to where I want to be?
Now, you, at this point, you were not married yet, correct?
No, but I had just started dating.
That's right.
Yeah. I had just started dating my wife at that time, and it was very intentional. I was like, I knew right away. I was like, this is probably it. And so very late nights, long days. I was working 40 hours a week, physical therapy. I was working at home health, trying to, just make a little bit more money so I could start buying investment properties and building for the perceived family that was, right in front of me.
Yeah.
And then pouring everything that I could into that relationship to make sure that I secured the bag, so to speak. And yeah, it's stressful. But at the end of the day, none of that would have happened. I wouldn't be where I'm at right now with the wife that I have, the daughter that I have, the business that we have, if I didn't think there was a little bit more to life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have just graduated college.
Sure.
And be searching for a physical therapy job, which is cool. My brother just graduated and he's started his physical therapy practice and he's crushing it and he loves it. I'm happy with the decision that I made to think about a little bit more back then, because it put me in a much different spot now than what I would be, I guess right now, technically.
Yeah, for sure. So a lingering question I would have then is, so you had that previous life that a lot of people that are listening might think like, well, that's completely detached from where you're at now. Like real estate and physical therapy are completely two different things. Yeah. But oftentimes, we find in like, if we have a career before what we're doing now, there's a lot of times where it can go, for example, for me, like when I was working with Gary and Wayne and I was running their marketing. And so now I have like an arm in that, plus I was in the real estate investing space for 6 or 7 years. And now all of my services are focused in the real estate investing space. Yep. For you, they're detached. Like, have you been able, is there any bridges from that life of physical therapy that you've been able to translate over to real estate?
So the primary reason that I got into physical therapy in the first place is because I was thinking, when I was finishing up high school, I was thinking about how can I show people that I can make a difference, and how can I be different, and how can I represent Christ in a way that makes an impact on other individuals.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew that, working in the church and different things like that probably wasn't for me. But there's so many different ways that you can represent Christ and your family, and make an impact on people. And one of those is by helping them when they're at the lowest point of their life. And so physical therapy was kind of just that. From a physical standpoint, people are at the lowest parts of their life when you have a stroke, when you have a heart attack, when you have a hip or a knee replacement, when an athlete blows their knee out.
Yep.
It's a very, very difficult time physically and mentally for them. Yep. And I thought, what better way to stay around the thing that I love, which is, health, fitness, exercise, and sports, while making an impact on people and showing them a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason I got into it. And when I had to make a decision, when the business was starting to pick up very quickly, I had just finished my first full year of doctorate school to get my doctorate in physical therapy. And I'd step out of class in the middle of anatomy class or test. Like I'm in front of a cadaver, like a wide open cadaver. And I'm like, hold on a minute, man. I got a seller calling me. I go out and I lock up a deal, and my classmates would laugh at me. They'd be like, "Oh, Seth's out there closing the deal." I'm like, "Yeah, man, but business is running. I love this." But I also come back into the lab and I'm like, "This is actually really cool because it's going to help me with my clients." And so I had to make a decision when the business was moving and I was full time in school. Like, dude, which one am I going to let go? And I wasn't in school for physical therapy. I was in school to start a business, to create financial freedom and help people. And after a lot of soul searching, after talking to my parents who were like, "Oh, both of my sons are going to be doctors of physical therapy. Like, we've done a great job," having to have that conversation with them, like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm dropping out of school," was difficult. But the reason I did it was because the bridge there is I can take this same mindset of trying to create an impact on people's lives and put it into this business where, financially speaking, people may be pressed and I can be the impact that they need in their life. Or somebody had a family member pass away, and it sounds odd, but sometimes an asset is a stressor if you don't know what to do with it. Yep. And so our company makes that easy for people. Yep. Not only that, but so we're making an impact in the community that way, but also the employees that we hire, right? They all want to be able to impact their families and create financial freedom and make an impact on their local communities. And so I took the good reason for getting into physical therapy and wanting to make an impact on people's lives. And it transfers perfectly over to running a business and the impact of, the community that you're working with, but also the people that are within your business and the employees, the opportunities they get and the culture that they get to be part of.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's, I mean, I wouldn't even gone in that direction. I was looking for the punchline, and then like the connection is always going to be the purpose. Like it's
purpose.
It's what it was.
Yep.
Yeah, for you. So like, do you ever have like an itch for physical therapy to like, because obviously like you still take care of yourself, and
Sure.
that's like,
Try to.
yeah. And do you ever dabble back in that life at all, or is that something that's like, that was something that I did, and now I'm like kind of stepped out of it fully?
Yeah, because I drilled it so hard when I was in school that like it comes right back.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that if they've stepped out, but I do have it pretty closely tied in there. So a lot of times I just tell people I'm retired.
Yeah.
But I have family members that need things at times, and I'll do that just to help them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually I just tell people I'm retired.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, that's pretty awesome. And I think like that's why it's so important to make sure you have a purpose in alignment.
Yeah,
and it seems like you had that like,
we should have just said that. I could have been like, man, purpose was it.
yeah, that was it.
But the story, I guess, helps. So
This story does help because it gives a lot of context to like, because I'm like, that's why I asked the question. I'm like, where's the connection? Where's that bridge?
a lot of people have that question, and it seems like there wouldn't be at all. It's like one's the business is dealing with assets and making money, and the other one's like your core focus is to help individuals get back on their feet and back into regular daily function.
Right.
It seems like they're completely disconnected, but if you're doing them for the same purpose, it serves.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the path to like getting to either one of those, like you were in school and you were working on like moving up in the rankings with your education and that sort of thing, going to college, and then over here in real estate, you just kind of jumped in and self-taught, and then obviously you surrounded yourself with mentors and stuff like that, but it's just two completely different ways to get into a career.
Right.
So you're one of those rare people that have tried the path of going to college and going to school and, your traditional education, and then you went this way into real estate and self-education. So
yeah, I will say, actually college has a negative rap on it these days, I feel. But I will say my wife and I are both college educated. We have bachelor's degrees. So I was a year into my doctorate program. The one positive thing I'll say about it is, not all cases, but most cases, if you're in a pretty intense program, the problem-solving ability that you get from college, just being put in front of certain scenarios, I think is super helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Not applicable in every major and every degree, but I do, especially in the health field scenario where you have to figure out what's wrong with the person standing right in front of you and correct it without second guessing, because a lot of client relation is based on the faith they have in the practitioner.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So if you're like, I don't know what's wrong with this person, you need to like on the spot be like, I'm pretty sure it's this. Here's the correction plan. And that's probably 40% of the battle right there, is them believing that you believe in the diagnosis and then adjusting it based on what you see. But yeah, I don't know.
No, that's a good point. And I do think like I'm the type like I didn't step into a college classroom in my entire life. And I'm not the type of person, I'm in the camp of like, college is for nobody. Like it's big waste of money and time. I do think there's like, especially the medical field, there's a place for it. Right. So there are some professions that, going to school, getting your doctorate and spending a lot of time in there is like really vital and important. But I agree with you in the case of traditional education. One of the things that it should be highlighted more, I don't think it's highlighted enough, is the problem solving. I think that problem solving is one of the number one skills that a leader, not just a business owner, but a leader in any way, shape, or form has to have. Yep. Again, we're related to sports. Like if you're a leader on the team, then you have to problem solve like what the defense is doing right now. Like how are they shifting and moving? Are they switching on picks? Are they staying home? Like there's so many different ways that a leader has to problem solve. in the moment.
Right.
And I just don't think that is something that's really aggressively taught to the younger generation, which is highly applicable to
very much
just like winning at life, and also on top of that, which something we could probably talk about too, is making those decisions, solving problems, and then being wrong about that problem that you solved, the solution that you created, like failing at it, right? So I guess that's a good conversation to have. So like let's call it the 4.5 years that you've been doing this, what's been a failure that's taught you a really big lesson?
I would say the leadership portion of it, right? So we had done one full year of business until the end of 2021. So we started in May of 2020. That didn't really kick off until we didn't get our first deal till the end of September. So
okay.
There was probably 5-6 months of grinding in there.
Yeah.
Then we finally had a deal to close. And then at that point, we were cash flowing because 1 or 2 deals a month, right? I quit my job at that time, which is one of those things I said I'd probably do a little bit different now that I know how everything works.
Yeah.
But then we went full-time in real estate, and then the very next year, we did just over 50 deals, and it kind of, accelerated everything.
Yeah.
The end of that year, we were sitting on a good chunk of money to reinvest back into the business, and we're like, okay, let's go hire some in-office employees. And it was a disaster. It was horrible. One of the hires was my sister-in-law, just because you always want to make sure that you can help and grow your family.
Yep.
And the other one was a guy that's still with us, and he's now absolutely killing it. So he stayed with us during that time. But just the lack of understanding how to lead people.
Yeah.
You think that leadership is a just natural thing until you're put in a position to
Here's your job. Here's what you do.
Dude,
cool.
So it's so tough because you think like I played sports and I could get people to rally around my energy, and like you work hard, everybody else works hard with you, right? And it's literally not.
Yeah,
it's not that at all. It's so much more than that, and I can't even describe how much hurt and pain and like tears had gone into me not knowing how to lead people, and then the mentorship calls and the books that needed to be read just to make sure that I could retain the people that were there and lead them in the right direction. At that point, it wasn't about me anymore. It was making sure that they could feed their families and grow what they wanted to grow. And I failed as a leader for probably the first year of having employees. And now I look at every single one of my employees and I was like, look, if I would have hired you when we first started, like this wouldn't have gone very well. And we're at a much different place because I got the coaching that we needed.
Absolutely.
We got the mentorship that we needed, and I now understand what it takes to lead a team. Not to say that I'm a great leader of my team, but I do my best to make sure that they're taken care of and they know exactly what they need to do.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big truth too that I think needs to be drilled into a lot of people's heads. Great example is like my business. So I started off, like I hired my first employee 2 months after I went into business full time. And I just like the team grew after that. And I quickly realized, and the kind of the thing that tipped the domino to make the decision was I hired Gabby, my wife. She still does the same job, but she's our social media manager. So she does all the postings of the content that gets created by our team and everything. And we just did not work. Both of us were both, strong-willed, that we go at each other often, and that was early on in our marriage too. So there were some challenges. So it was both the business side and the marriage side. And one thing that we both sat down finally and decided was like, we need to have somebody that's like between us. Like you're this, like Josh, the CEO, Gabby, you're like an employee, but we need to have somebody that's in between, which naturally would be a COO. And so that's when Hannah, my sister, was working as one of our copywriters, and I felt like she was a perfect fit for that role because her and I, our communication levels are really, really good. Like we never really bickered growing up and that sort of thing. Like we would do annoying brother and sister stuff, but like we never really went at each other's throats. And I just felt like, it made the most sense to put her in that position. And she stayed there for about 4 years. And I look at my team members now. We just recently had to move her back into the writing role just because the way, life has developed for her and the business has developed on our side. And it just made the most sense for her. And but during that early time, we now have 10 employees, if I included myself. During that early time, I definitely wouldn't have been a good leader for myself. Like the thing is, like, leadership develops, like your skills develop over time.
Right.
And if I had the team now if the team that I have now, if I had it back then, nobody would have been working for me like today. Like I wasn't that good of a leader. And it developed over time. And then what I quickly realized was Hannah gained so much respect from every single team member. And we don't have turnover. Like, we have, I believe, 3 of our employees have been with us for over 4 years, and we've been in business for 5. So it's done well in terms of like retaining that. And to me, like, retaining employees, quality employees, is all about like the leadership, right? Because like, if they don't enjoy working for you, then they're not going to stick around, right? But they gave so much respect to Hannah, and then she was able to help develop them as team members and really maintain what was going on. And then, it really helped me to have some like room to grow as a leader in that position. And I just think that like that's something that a lot of people just really don't understand, is like leadership's a growth phase. Like it's development. You don't start off as a great leader, regardless if you think you were like the star player on your team in high school. Like,
big misconception. And I think, I could talk about failure from a monetary perspective, honestly.
Yeah.
But
we all can.
I don't think that it is purely monetary or a stupid decision in any case. I think it all comes from a breakdown of leadership.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
If we lose money somewhere, it's because someone isn't being led the right way.
Right.
I'm not leading a project manager the way that I need to lead them when it comes to flipping a house. And so she doesn't have the clarity she needs. Projects, it's a little bit too long. Or I'm not leading a salesperson the right way when it comes to running an appointment. They didn't play their cards the right direction and we lost the deal, right?
Yeah.
That it all comes from, is the person being led the right way?
Yeah.
And then are they being set up for success? And if your people are invested there, if you put into your people the right way, everything else is going to line up, and you are going to have a successful business.
And they go to war for you. Like, they'll do anything for you.
They really do.
And the performance level just shoots through the roof. Funny story. It's a little cheesy, but it's a good story, and it's really based off of the conversation we're having. So when I was younger, we had the movie A Bug's Life. Okay. And I remember when I had to have been like 8 or 9 years old. We were watching it. It wasn't my first time watching it, but we were watching it like as a family. And there's a point towards the beginning of the movie where, and this is one of the greatest lessons that Disney has ever taught. I'm just straight up. But there's a point at the beginning of the movie where like they're like getting all the food gathered for the grasshoppers and everything, and then Flick like does something, screws it up, and all the food goes away, and then the grasshoppers are pissed off, so then they come down to where the ants are, and he approaches the princess of the colony, and he's basically like grilling her, like, where's the food and that sort of thing. And then she starts to make an excuse, like, but it was his fault. And then the leader of the grasshoppers like points at her and says, first rule of leadership, everything is your fault. And I'm like, and I remember my dad pausing the movie, and it was like on a VHS, so we had the little lines through it, right? And he paused the movie and he says, hey, just remember what that happened. And he kind of like gave me a story and started talking about it, because I was just starting to get into sports a little bit more. And he's like, if you're ever going to lead anything, this is one of the things that you have to remember, is like everything rises and falls on leadership, everything. And I'm like, yeah, but what about like if like this person does that? I was like, no, everything is your fault, everything. Yep. And I get it. Like there's some times where it's like, you may have an employee that blatantly does something bad, and you can make an excuse for like, well, no, he just like is having a really bad day.
Right.
Yeah, but like you didn't train him enough in that position to handle bad situations if he is having a bad day. Right. Like there's always an excuse that can be made. but it always comes back to the way that you're leading.
Right.
And that's a hard truth for a lot of people to learn.
It's one of the worst parts of business.
It is.
It is because
it's one of the biggest responsibilities.
It's one of the biggest responsibilities. And at the end of the day, when something does break down like that, you really want to point the finger and be like, that was their fault.
Yeah.
That was negligent. They should have known better. At the end of the day, it's like, did you really set them up to have an understanding that they should have known better, or they should have done it differently? And 99 out of 100 times the answer is you didn't do what you needed to do to allow them to succeed in that situation. And it all comes down to your preparation and the way that you lead them once they're in that situation.
Yeah. And I do think that, leadership development is something that everybody, not just if you're a business owner, needs to invest in.
Yep.
But you're going to lead your family.
Yeah.
You're going to lead a church group. You're going to lead a sports team, or you're going to lead a business. Like, it doesn't matter what you're leading, or even just a small team at your workplace. Like, the more that you invest in yourself in leadership, that's going to be one of those things that you're never going to lose. Like, it's always going to make you grow. And it's kind of the pinnacle of, like, where I believe education starts, is like learning how to be a good leader.
Yep.
And you can always start with some basic stuff, just reading books on leadership and that sort of thing. And everybody thinks that it's like just, natural. I think that's a big excuse for a lot of people. It's like, he's a natural born leader.
I hear that. I'm like,
no, that doesn't happen.
It's
no,
not something that happens.
No, I think there's some DNA that plays into it depending on your personality. However, like, I have met some grade A assholes that have the personality of a leader, but they're not a leader, right? And you've met them too. Like, there's endless people that we could point out. And leadership is not something you're born with; it's something you develop.
Yep,
for sure. Dude, we're almost at an hour.
Yeah,
it's been it's been quick.
You said I was gonna go fast.
We could hang out a little bit more, but
man.
I want to make sure to give you the opportunity. We'll this was also in the intro, but obviously, you own the business Dynasty Real Estate, co-owner, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk to the people that are listening about this. So if you're in Northwest Indiana and you need help with selling your property, so give your spiel. Where can people find you? How can they get connected?
Yeah. So if you live in Northwest Indiana, or even in certain areas in the Indiana market on the Illinois side, and you're looking to sell your house, it may not be for everyone, but people that do need to sell their house quickly, or they have a house that may be dilapidated or inherited, going through foreclosure, divorce situation, we've been more than willing to help you. You can Google us. That is a big thing for us lately. Dynasty Real Estate and Property Solutions.
Mm-hmm.
We're located right in Griffith. We have a Facebook page at Dynasty Real Estate. Very simple. You can look us up online, webuy219.com. Look me up online, Instagram and Facebook, Seth Hardy, or Seth Hardy REI. Something like some dot or underscore.
We manage your social, so we should know.
Yeah, we should know that. But
we'll have all that linked below.
We can plug it right here.
We'll have it all. It'll pop up on the screen or down below.
Yeah, but if you guys need any help, seriously, I'd love to send my team out there. A very high-level individual will come out and help you through the process. So I'd be more than willing to buy anybody's house if they're interested in selling.
Yeah, absolutely. Seth, dude, it has been a great time. A lot of impactful conversations that we've had. Obviously, the point of the podcast here is to talk about ways that you can impact other people's lives, or ways that you've been impacted in your life.
Yep.
And we've had some really, really good conversations about that. I want to tell you that I appreciate you and your friendship.
Likewise.
We also actually had you on my other podcast, the REI Marketing Weekly, that went out earlier this week. So if you guys are in real estate, go check that out. The REI Marketing Weekly is a podcast that I host weekly, and Seth was on that show talking about the marketing that he does in his business. So, dude, it's been great. Looking forward to having you back again soon.
Yeah, likewise. And if anybody has any questions about how to get started in real estate, please feel free to reach out. We don't have anything to sell you. It's just want to help somebody in the same situation that I was in. Hopefully get there a little bit quicker.
Yep. Absolutely. Appreciate that, man. Guys, everything that Seth mentioned is going to be linked down in the description below, so make sure you do check that out and connect with them. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Impact Network. It's been a great time here with Seth Hardy. And if you haven't already, make sure you have subscribed to the show. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do me a huge favor and leave a review. That really does help out the podcast. And if you do have anybody that's local to the Chicagoland area, Northwest Indiana, that you think might be a good fit for the show, I am taking applications. So find me on social media, send me a direct message, and connect me with whoever you think might be a good fit. People that are impacting other people's lives for good. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next one. See ya.